We're gonna start with roll call. I am here. Suzanne,
Here.
Patrick,
Here.
John,
Here.
Bill,
Here.
Jason,
Here.
and Greg.
Here.
Super. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the previous minutes?
Nope.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move the minutes be approved.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second? Great, thank you. I will vote in favor. Suzanne,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
The minutes are unanimously approved. Thank you. Megan, as we move to announcements, I'm going to make a quick announcement first, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So just before the meeting, Bill and I were just talking with Shelley about tools that we might use after we've met with developers to express thoughts as Apex citizens, not as members of the environmental board. So if after a particular meeting, you have thoughts on a rezoning, the best way to express those thoughts is to email either or both. Email allcouncil@apexnc.org, and you can email allplanningboard@apexnc.org. And then you'd be expressing your opinion as an Apex citizen, not as a member of the AB.
Please be sure to do that from your personal email addresses instead of your Apex email addresses. That way we don't get that confused. And if you don't mind copying me on those emails, just because if it goes directly to planning board and town council before staff gets a chance to work with the developer on any of your concerns, then we may not know what's happened. Normally that gets sent back to us as well, but just as an FYI. If you don't have my email address, I'm happy to share it with you.
Should we wait till looking at the agendas on these places, on these boards before we send that, or should we send it right away?
I think we would at least have the meeting, right?
Oh, yeah, I had the meeting, but try to get it to them in a timely manner when they're going to be looking at it.
I would think so.
Yes. Okay.
Megan, are there further announcements?
I believe so, but I did just want to say that I will, in my follow-up email to you all, send a summary of that with all the correct email addresses. And I believe that Jessica has an announcement for us.
Yes, I wanted to introduce you to Robert Patterson. I think you guys had met Stan Fortier in the past. He was our senior stormwater engineer who since retired in May. And Robert Patterson comes to us from the state. We go way back stormwater wise. If you want to give a little background, you can. He was actually one of the authors of the SCM manual. That's what I like to kind of brag about. So he knows stormwater backwards and forwards, and we're really glad to have him. And between the two of us, we'll be handling the stormwater, any stormwater concerns or questions that come up at the EAB meetings. I just wanted you to meet him in person and welcome him. So yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
Glad to have you on board.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And I guess the other thing I think we had emailed about, trying to make these meetings be in person again. This is the only board that is still meeting hybridly. And so, from the IT staff standpoint, just the logistics of running a meeting, and I think just more conducive, better conversation happens in person if we can. If there's any major concerns, we can express those now or later. You guys can email staff. That's just kind of what we've been told, is to try to get this all back in person. So I don't know if that can happen by August, or like I said, if we hear some major concerns, but we'll discuss more. But if you have any concerns on that, let me know and Megan know over email. And otherwise we can plan to meet in person here moving forward, starting in August. That's all I had.
Megan, do you have other announcements?
That's all I have.
Great. Committee updates?
Yes. Okay. So Tree Cap and Bee City are both very much still on board with providing full feedback on the recommendations list. So it's not like it was forgotten. I know it's taken a few months now, especially to get Bee City's feedback. They just haven't been able to reach a quorum at their meetings. So they're hoping to reach one at their next one, which is August 31st, addressing the rezoning's conditions list. is at the top of their list to do. And so following that meeting, hopefully they'll have some concrete recommendations for us for that conditions list from the Bee City perspective. And then because there's been a changeover with both membership and the liaison role for Bee City committee, for Tree Cap, excuse me, they are going to take another look at the conditions list and provide recommendations. So Tree Cap, their July meeting was canceled. Their next meeting is August 4th, and that's where they'll address the tree specific items for the rezonings list. Bee City, in addition to this effort, the Girl Scouts are working on signage and a video to add to the pollinator garden and town's website. That's all I have on them.
Thanks. Would a member of the UDO work group like to give us an update? Suzanne, I feel like that would probably be you.
Okay, or John can do it too. I might pass it off to him. I apologize. I'm outside in the cicadas or occasionally singing. So we met again to remind everybody, we are sort of revamping the suggested zoning conditions list. What Shelley is showing is what it's going to look like. Adam, John, and I are taking another pass through it to make sure everything is consistent. And then I think we'll have it ready to go out to the board for you all to take a look at. So this header sections are what you'll be familiar with. Those have not changed. The whole list has been split up into residential and non-residential sections. And then within those, you'll have those headers. And then previously, the language that we have as suggested zoning conditions has been turned into goals. And then below that, there is like the actual language that planning staff will use or the board can take and modify or tailor to a specific project. And then the intention is for the applicant to go through and actually check yes, no, or not applicable. So they're really considering these different things for both the residential part, or if it's sort of a mixed thing for both the residential and non-residential sections of their development, or just a non-residential development. So that's where we're at. I think the intention is, this is still a living document. So as people review it, if you understand a goal not to be what the language is expressing, then perhaps change that. Or if there's a goal that's missing, add that. And then of course, we'll have the comments coming in from Bee City and Tree Cap as well. So I'm wondering if maybe we should provide this to Bee City and Tree Cap before they spend too much time on something that might change a whole bunch.
I think that would probably be a good idea, because there's fairly substantial changes, not only in the design and layout, but in how we're interpreting the language too. And it may help them.
We can definitely do that.
Fantastic. So is this the version that you all feel most ready to present?
This is the one we are currently reviewing. Yeah.
Okay.
It has all but like a couple of little things that need to be double checked.
Of course. So in that case, I can let both Bee City and Tree Cap know to hold off on the one that's been sent to them. Is it possible that it can be completed in its draft form for them to review before August 1st? That way, Tree Cap can review it by their next meeting.
Send you what we have right now, and then if the board members can get me their comments back and before then I can send that out once I get it.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan.
And if not, they'll at least have this version to look at, which is much closer.
Great, thank you. This is great work.
Yeah, thank you. I know that was a lot of work. Thank you very much. It's great. I think we're ready to move to pre-app meetings. Do we have representatives in person from the town station?
Yes.
Great. Feel free to come join us.
Do I jump in the putty?
Sure. Or just next to Patrick is fine too.
All right. First time I've done this in person.
Sure.
Welcome, welcome. And just for admin purposes, if you'll state the names of the folks that are there, that would be most helpful.
So my name is Patrick Kiernan. I'm with Jones and Knosson Engineering. I've got Kyler Zadell here representing our client. The project, I know you got it pulled up right there on the screen. It is a roughly 85 to 90 unit townhome subdivision in Southwest Apex. Kind of there in the same corner of town that all the Friendship Station, Apex Friendship High School, you know, down there in that Little Beaver Creek drainage basin. The project is more or less an infill project situated south of Friendship Station sections 1 and 2 and east of sections 4 through 6, north of the state conservation easement, and then west of the school system. So it's really, you know, in our minds, a continuation of several of the other planned developments in that area. So we're kind of modeling a lot of our product types and zoning conditions and that sort of thing based on the surroundings. To speak specifically on environmental, I guess I'll go down the list of the conditions. But before I do that, I'll also point out there are several wetlands on site, as well as one main stream that runs north-south, and then a smaller tributary that branches off. But then also on the southern portion of the property is part of that North Carolina conservation easement that I talked about. So that is obviously untouchable. So that whole area down there getting into the floodplain of Little Beaver Creek is all, you know, we're going to be staying well away from all that and kind of utilizing just the small amount of developable land on this property. Would you like me to go through the list here just one by one? Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. So what we offered when we submitted the pre-app meetings request form was, first, we are willing to offer adding the 25-year storm in the pre versus post analysis for stormwater control, meaning that post-development flows will not exceed pre-development flows for the 25-year storm, which is beyond the 1 in 10 year requirements, normal requirements of EDO. Second, signage shall be provided in HOA areas surrounding SCMs regarding the need to eliminate and reduce fertilizer and pet waste near those SCMs. Developers shall install pollinator-friendly and native flora within the SCM planting areas. At least 75% of plant species used in the landscape design shall be native. All perimeter buffers, SCMs, and other HOA maintained areas may be planted with clover or warm season grasses for drought resistance. And then kind of tagged onto that, in order to reduce water consumption and promote pollinator-friendly habitat and biodiversity, HOA covenants shall permit clover lawns throughout the neighborhood, so those will not be prohibited. Minimum of 1 pet waste station shall be installed in HOA common area. All homes shall include solar conduit in the building design to facilitate future rooftop solar installation. And any and all outdoor lighting within HOA maintained areas shall utilize full cutoff fixtures. Oh, we got cut off, but that should say that have, what is it, the 3000 K warmth. Okay, yeah, it's the same one that we've offered in the past. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I got cut off there. So that's our list. I know that we received one comment, Mr. Jensen, your comment about the 29 solar units. And I appreciate the email you sent and making that introduction with Stu. Admittedly, I don't think a lot of research has been done yet on our end regarding that. So we're not in a place where we can commit to anything right now, beyond obviously the conduit on every unit. But
And was that suggestion for the amenity space?
no, it was for the townhome
No, they
units
don't have
themselves.
space. There was 29 houses that had back roofs that were facing south out of the 83 or whatever.
Okay,
All of the other ones, the east and west ones, can also take solar. I mean, it's 85% of the efficiency of a southern facing road. So every one of these buildings almost in this development could take solar. I picked the 29 to not overdo it, and it's a very easy build. So frankly, I've heard this before. We can't look at it right now and we'll consider it. To me, that is a no. What you're telling me is no. So that's what I'm going to take it as.
I would like to have more conversation about it. I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, reading between the lines. I mean, I hear what you're saying, especially based on past experiences. Right now, I can't.
I understand.
Really say anything
You're
beyond
representing Brad, and Brad could have gotten back to me. I emailed Brad, she will know. And there was time to discuss this, and there wasn't any discussion. So I appreciate your position where you're at, and you're representing somebody. But it is still, in my opinion, a no. From what I found out in the past, every time when it's, we'll consider that is no. That's what it turns out to be. So.
it can still be a recommendation of this board.
Oh, yeah, I think we'll recommend it, but it's.
Yeah, that's
That's what I take it as. If I was going to say, do I like this thing or not like this thing based on we'll consider it, I would say I don't like it. Because, I mean, the world is burning. Developers need to understand that they have their part to try to do their little bitty piece of sand on the beach of doing better and moving us towards a renewable energy position. And
That's why we're gonna make the recommendation, right?
yeah, we'll,
That's
and
why it'll be on the list.
maybe I'll make it for all 83, if that's the case too. They can go ahead and pick. Would you think about that? I tried to do 29 because I thought that was reasonable. And then once the developer gets into it and recognizes the benefits, like there's a developer out on Holt Road who committed to, I think it was 8%. And he's going above and beyond that because he has recognized the benefit and the sales value of it. And and I looked at 29 as getting Brad into doing it so that he would recommend.
right.
Or not, it's going to be MI Homes, I'm sure is what's going to do that. That's my.
Part of that is part of the problem is that's not determined yet who will be actually developing the property versus, whether it's development or purchasing developed lots.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I obviously I know where you're coming from, and I agree that there's, that it's a different world today than it was even 5 years ago. Part of it probably, to your point, is a little bit of a learning curve with people realizing that it's working for other folks and, sort of, inching into it. And I'm sure, every year it's going to become more and more common to see. But like I said, I mean, I would like to keep having those conversations. And I'm not saying one way or another right now. I understand what you're,
I'll be more than happy to help you guys out as much as I can. I remember some time ago, we're talking about learning curves. Andy Sandman did a job out on 751, I think, or out that way. And committed to 10%, just 10% at that time was what I was trying for. And I think it's 10% he committed to. And he ended up selling it off to Toll Brothers. So, and it's not a huge impact on any costs or anything else. It's really low. It's less than 1% of the cost of the darn house. I think I'd have to look at, depending on what the house is. Say it's 2%. Well, studies have shown that houses are worth 4.2% more when they sell them if they have solar than if they don't. So it's an automatic. Okay.
I want to make sure we have time for other people.
Yeah, I know.
Excuse myself, I'm not sure if MI will purchase this or not. That's an assumption that MI will purchase. So
Yeah, I don't know whether they are either.
I'm just going to introduce myself in this.
Oh, you're MI?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I am, yes.
That's fair
I
enough.
thought you were such a nice guy.
I just got one.
John, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. On your Petway station, would y'all consider a minimum of 4? That's a
Right, yeah.
lot
it's
of
a
units. It's a whole
Yeah,
lot of
sure,
units.
sure.
4, okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss that. I mean, I certainly don't have any issue with that number. I think it's a very small, commitment on our end. I'm more just curious to look at the layout and see what would be good opportunity, good places for it. I think stormwater areas up there in the cul-de-sac, I can see maybe by the play lawn. So yeah, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I just need to look at the best places for them.
Do you have other questions for Patrick? Go ahead, Suzanne.
So where would your RCA be on this? Are you using the existing already area under conservation easement sort of concurrently as your RCA, or where is that going to be?
Partially, it actually is sort of shown on here, although this pre-app sketch was pretty bare bones, so it's not labeled, but there is, I haven't calculated exactly what's underneath the conservation easement. It's probably close to 2 acres if I had to guess, but we do have a significant amount of RCA in the stream buffers and wetland areas, kind of that bisects the property. But then also, if you look to the west, Richardson Road will be extended about 500 feet throughout this property. And there's another big chunk over to the west of Richardson Road that we are just preserving as RCA. So between the buffers, that area over there, the perimeter buffers, and then the pre-existing conservation easement, we should be well over the 30% minimum. What that actually comes out to is TBD. But that's sort of where we're approximating our RCA areas.
Okay, and Shelley, perhaps you could help with this on that. So in between those townhomes, there's no buffer required on the south side. There's not any kind of buffer required in between those townhomes and the conservation area, correct? Because it's not.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the conservation easement is obviously, to be completely stayed out of, but up till then, and we've had other recent projects that border the conservation easement. Obviously, that sewer outfall that you see on the screen was recently put in, kind of bordering a good chunk of that conservation easement. So that is sort of a natural buffer over there on the east side of the stream, and there's no physical buffer to it, but the conservation easement is sort of its own protection. So I'm not sure what the need for additional buffer would be.
Well, the state, has spent a substantial amount of money restoring that area. So any kind of activity on the adjacent property does have the potential to impact it, especially if it's downstream, which is why I was asking about that. The whole lot right now is currently forested or treed, correct?
Yes, other than what's been cleared for that sewer outfall.
And so are you going to mass grade it as well?
Since this is a townhome project, it'll be mass graded. That's correct.
Okay, and okay, I would like to suggest adding the condition to stay out of the infrastructure shall not be placed in either zone of the riparian buffer, except as necessary for the installation of apex utilities. And then I would also like to add, I noticed this was in the TRC, perhaps you will consider donating to a local nonprofit organization with a mission towards tree preservation, just because you are clearing a rather large amount of trees off the property. And the final question I had is this, I noticed that the land use plan was medium density residential. Is the density that you're proposing still in line with that? Is that about equivalent?
Yeah, it is medium density, and Shelley, just correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up to 6 units per acre.
If it's a planned unit development, it's up to 7.
Okay.
Just because that's, we're able to get additional concessions out of planned unit development. A regular medium density residential conditional zoning is up to 6, but this one is at 5.21 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, I think what we propose on the PUD will be around 5.5 units per acre density wise. So
okay,
well,
All right, well, that was all.
Suzanne, I added your conditions and I just want to jump in and say that we're at the 10-minute mark.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Anyone else have any other questions? Megan, if we can see the list of conditions, that would be great. You have to make it a little bigger. You may have to zoom in.
Okay, I'm gonna do this in pieces then.
Cool, thank you.
The only, I guess, final thought on one of those last, conditions that you suggested regarding grading or, disturbance within the stream buffer area. You have exception of Apex Utilities. I did want to note that there's a, greenway connection that is planned as well. And where the adjacent property is setting us up, that greenway runs essentially within the sewer easement, but based on grading and meandering and getting the curves right, we're probably going to be pushing the greenway a little bit close. You know, it's going to be within that same sewer easement, but shifted towards the stream. So I want to make sure that exception of Apex Utilities, that also includes other public Apex infrastructure.
So we frequently recommend that the greenways overlap with the utility easements as much as they can. It means a wider easement, but it lets us provide double the infrastructure and actually a smaller footprint. So there wouldn't actually be that much more disturbance required in order to put the greenway in. The greenway will frequently come back in and the Works Department will plant things along the boundaries of it to help with slope retention and things like that. This one in particular, this greenway will connect directly to Apex Friendship Elementary School. So providing a walkable path from the neighborhood directly to the school that won't have to worry about any road infrastructure or anything. So,
Yep, that's all I had.
Do
Anyone like
those
to make-
revisions look correct, Suzanne?
Anyone like to make a motion to approve this list of suggested zoning conditions?
I move for approval.
Thanks, John. Do we have a second? Great, thank you very much. I will vote in favor. Suzanne?
Aye.
Patrick, you're recusing yourself?
Just as a point of clarification, since MI has not contracted to purchase this, you don't have to. You still may.
I think it's appropriate.
That's
I think
just to be,
it's appropriate.
thank you.
John,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Jason,
Aye.
and Greg.
Yes.
Great. So that list of suggested zoning conditions is approved. Patrick, thank you very much.
There you go. Appreciate your time.
And do we have in-person representatives from Elevate Apex?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Please join us.
Thank you.
And do we have Craig, Philip, and Joe here this evening?
Yes. Craig Taylor's here and Joe Faulkner's here. Philip is not here.
Okay, great. Am I missing anyone?
No.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I'm Craig Taylor with Signature Property Group, which is the ultimate developer of what we're calling Elevate Apex. We're a locally owned Greensboro-based developer of multifamily apartments throughout North Carolina. This will be our first foray into Apex. We're looking forward to becoming neighbors here. We have properties in Fuquay Varina, Garner, and Raleigh. So we've been quite active in the Triangle over the last few years. The property in question is the Goodwin property, which is up on Highway 64. And it is in the Apex land use plan proposed for high density housing and commercial uses, which is the use that we're proposing. The current condition on land is 2 homes. It's been partly cleared. There is some cleared land being used for farming or gardening. And then there's quite a bit of pine timber that's been planted for future timbering operations there, as well as quite a bit of wetlands, as you can see, running throughout the property. Our proposed use is 360 units of multifamily plus a commercial out parcel. The density, I believe, is about 9.6 units an acre. There's a really nice pond that will be retained, which we listed in our proposed zoning conditions that are up in front of me here. It'll be a fully amenitized apartment community, so we'll have clubhouse, pool, outdoor kitchen. There will be a dog park, and in addition to the dog park, we do place pet waste stations, you know, in convenient locations throughout our developments. Make sure that's taken care of. I know we proposed that EV charging stations be installed, and I noticed that that also came up on the list of proposed comments. We're happy to specify 5%. That's no problem. And then we will, of course, incorporate native flora into the landscape plan. The board's comments, in addition to those, other than the EV charging spaces, are retention ponds and the PV system. So I'll address the retention ponds first. We think there may be there's going to be probably 2 to 3 retention ponds on the site due to the way that the site is split up by the wetland features. We will certainly be designing those at the 25-year limit. We may be able to make 1 or more of them into 100-year ponds, but we haven't done that engineering yet. We've been under contract on this property for about 60 days and have this concept plan, but we don't have our full on-site topo, geotech, other things like that to fully engineer our stormwater ponds. So I would like to commit to the 25-year, but we certainly will look at the 100-year option if the engineering accommodates it. The PV system, we just got this email yesterday with the proposed PV system. It's the first time we've evaluated such a thing. And, you know, I heard the comments with the prior developer. I certainly understand where you're coming from, that people say, well, think about it, it can mean no. I get that. You obviously know a lot about this, and there's very specific numbers in here. And I would like to learn more about it. I would like to take it back to ownership and say, look, does this make sense or not for what we do? We do build to hold, and we do build for long-term ownership. So we're not building to flip, and it's very possible that a solar system could be a net positive for what we want to do. So I'd like to learn more about it and do some research on it, and maybe something we can incorporate into our development. So with that, Joe is our engineer, and he can help me answer more technical questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Does anyone have any questions for Craig or Joe?
Could I speak just briefly on the PV system? I picked 25 kilowatts, and that obviously you need to know what your estimated usage is going to be. I took a look at one that's out in Chatham County that is somewhat similar, smaller, and that's why I picked that number. But I don't know, is your email address on the application? I could help you out as you go down the line. I'll be glad to help you.
I know mine is, sure,
Okay.
but I believe both.
I'm not in the solar business, but I'm heavy into understanding it. And I have designed and built one for a friend. Managed to lose a bunch of money just doing it. But more than happy to do that. It's kind of my real interest in these things. So thank you. I'll help you out.
Was the recommendation for homes or for the amenities?
The reckon was for the amenity because they are apartments, and I'm not sure that can be forced down yet. We'll see.
But it's a lot of apartments, right?
It's a-
And a big
yeah.
amenity center, so it seems.
It's a
appropriate.
big, yeah, it's just to do the amenity center. I noticed they had you have a pool, you got pumps and all that sort of stuff. So throughout the year, you're going to be using a reasonable amount of electricity, and it can be very, it does give you a reasonable reasonable payback, certainly on a 25K system. Okay, thank you.
Suzanne, oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I noticed you have 2 road crossings of that same stream that's fragmenting that riparian habitat. Have you explored perhaps sort of tweaking the design so you're not crossing the stream twice?
I guess the concern there is really more relevant public safety, and having 2 accesses to that rear portion due to the number of units. The first crossing, we have a line, there is an existing pipe section there on the northern portion on that one, and that was sort of the reason why that location was picked versus getting over into the wetland more, or further down into the buffer. And the lower one, unfortunately, just by this site being bifurcated the way it is, and wanting to provide more than one entrance out was the reason why.
Okay, and DOT is cool with those 2 entrances being so close together on 64?
Those are existing breaks, and there are existing driveways there. I mean, we have not, we just recently have gotten a transportation engineer on board, and we're actually going to be looking into potentially trying to get a full access break at the first one, because it does seem to meet the distances between where the next full break access is at. So that would be just a median break, not a control access break. So there are 2 existing control accesses.
For like the other ones that do Olive Chapel, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And then there's another one. It's about 1,000 feet away. It's about 1,000 feet in each direction.
So if you can speak on the more than 50 units to a second.
So actually the developer has not met with TRC yet, so we have some comments that, I think that meeting is next week or the week after possibly. So we have some comments that we have to give to them that we haven't delivered yet. The town's ordinance actually requires 3 points of connection for anything over 300 units. This one is currently showing 2. Even if it's less than 300 units, they would still have to cross the creek more than once if they're going to have more than 50 units on the far side of the creek. And that's purely to make sure that if EMS or fire have to get back there, that there's more than one route for them to take in case one of them ends up getting clogged, either because of evacuations or because of an accident. And it's a standard that all of our residential developments have to abide by. So I understand your concern entirely, but unfortunately, the public safety concern.
With the back of the property, is there any way to make a connection from back that way?
Yeah, there's a private drive. You can see it there to the east. Yeah, Lawson, that is actually a Lawson Drive. I'm not sure what the legalities are as far as on the ownership of that, but we'll look into that. We have if you look at the land plan there, but we stubbed that parking lot down to the south out for just that reason, to have that potential to be able to make that additional connection.
That is a private road at this point. It's not public.
Right.
And just, but no, that's good.
We've been trying to figure out if this property has an existing easement right to use that road, which is kind of an interesting mystery. The entire sort of title to all these properties is an interesting tangle. So we're working on that.
Is the property adjacent to that Ross Lane, had that already been brought in for a site plan?
You're thinking of Legacy?
It's one over.
It's
Which is- Right.
Where's the Lawson Lane?
It goes up, I think, to that parcel.
Lawson Lane connects right here. It's actually just kind of a large family driveway situation. And that was probably mentioned when you all heard the Legacy Station proposal about a year ago. But it doesn't. Interesting is a good characterization. the status, things out there. And this is all kind of one big family. But yeah, you're thinking of Legacy Station, which is the piece just off the page. There is also in Deer Creek a stub street out property to the south, which has potential. And all of it's gonna be interesting to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that there's, I think on the transportation plan, there's a north-south, almost running like we're Lawson Lane, close to it, if I recall. We're in that general vicinity.
With regard to pet waste stations, can we get you to commit to a number of waste stations?
Yeah, I'm sure we can. Right off the top of my head, I can't think of how many we normally do, but we want them to be convenient to each of the buildings, just for our own residents, sanitation and health. And that's what we'll do. Maybe we could, how many buildings do we have?
Just phrase it as one per building. If you
Yeah,
want
we
to.
could just say one per building. I think that's fair.
I mean, they don't have to be right in front of the building because you've got a lot of
Sure.
open space, but I mean, if you could commit to one per building, that would be great.
Sure.
These two-story buildings.
Three.
3-story, 24 unit. And of course, we do have the dog park, so we certainly hope our residents will make use of that, but we don't assume that they always will, so.
Other questions?
But can I make a clarification? Is that one pet station per building include the dog park or not? Is that in addition to?
I would say it's almost, well, let's back up just a second. I don't want to get hung up on pet waste stations because everybody needs them, right? But if you think about, for example, the area right around the pool, we got the dog park already there, and they're pretty close together. Could we maybe compromise and say one every 2 buildings or something like that? Because there's going to be places where it doesn't make sense to just kind of pop them all over the place.
You can commit to any number that you'd like, and then the
10?
number could be a ratio and to be determined locations later.
It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not concerned about locations right now. I'm just concerned about the number.
Why don't we say 10? That'll scatter them out really good around the
10 total. Yeah. I think that, just looking at where our open spaces are providing, I think makes sense.
Suzanne, did you have a further question?
Yes, thank you, Katie. So where is your RCA going to be? Is that just totally contained within those stream buffers, or where are you putting that?
Some will be around the existing pond, portion that has trees that meet the requirement. There is a large significant amount, as you can tell, in the stream and wetland areas on the site. Any other areas really that, once we work through our grading plan and sort of, our goal typically is to leave, especially on the perimeter, as much existing vegetation as possible. But, unfortunately, the nature of these sites, similar to the previous conversation on the townhomes, it will be a mass grade site there. But again, we try to be sensitive to that.
Okay.
And,
I did notice that there was a large chunk of RCA adjacent to your property on the southwest side. If at all possible, this is not a zoning condition, just a recommendation that if you can sort of get as much RCA possible adjacent to that to sort of make like even bigger RCA, that would be beneficial from an ecological standpoint.
Yeah, our second stormwater pond down there to the south, you'll see that there's a little wetland finger outside of it. So, that corner there, my guess is a good portion of that's just in with that wetland there, it just makes that area a little bit more unusable. So, I could see that corner probably being incorporated into it also.
Okay. And what is your plan for that out parcel up there along the road in the northeast side?
Suzanne, I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to let you know that we're at 11 minutes, and I want to make sure that I had your recommendation down as well. You want to include as much RCA as possible adjacent to the green space.
You're great.
But
Is
if
that
you-
a recommended zoning condition or a personal recommendation?
That is just a personal recommendation. I mean, I don't know if we can make that into a zoning condition, if that's possible. I don't see how that could be enforceable.
Try. But I don't know what that would look like. We could try though.
Yeah, I would think, planning, board, that we would have a better idea of a lot of the questions that are being answered or asked here and be ready to make more commitment at that time. On that area.
Suzanne did ask a further question about the out personal.
Yeah, so we are still considering that use. It will be a commercial, non-residential use. We're sort of exploring with some of our commercial real estate partners what the best use for that might be. So right now, we don't really know.
Okay, I would like to recommend the same zoning conditions as we had previously about staying out of the stream buffers. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Does that include, so Greenway and town utilities? Thank you.
Can I make one further suggestion? And this is just a suggestion, because I've seen it before. If you have to rebuild that pond dam, if you can make sure that you lower the depth to the possible, whatever you can with considering slopes. Because these things, sometimes when they're so shallow, they end up as more like mud ponds. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, thanks. We are going to have a dam expert review that existing structure. We haven't done that yet. But the pond looks great. It's just a great pond. So I think hopefully it's in good condition and we won't have to tackle with it too much. Just leave it. Let it
That'd be a
happen.
minute, part of the minute.
I hear you. Yeah, leave it alone if you can. And I was just saying if you have to. Thank you.
Megan, can we see the full list of suggested conditions, please? Megan, I would just suggest on the highway station that it be a minimum 10.
We're gonna be picky. Could we take the word total off the number?
Yeah.
10?
Yeah, thank you.
Planning department.
Good
it's a
catch.
minimum of 10 total.
On the PD system, do we need the language after the first sentence or not?
Bill, would you like the language about cost to be included, or is that okay to leave off as part of the official recommendation?
I guess it can be left off. I just tried to promote it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was good information to have, so.
I think, yes, I think that's helpful information to have unnecessarily in. Is anyone ready to make a motion to approve this list of suggested conditions?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Bill. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. I will vote in favor. Suzanne?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Great, unanimously approved. Thank you both very much.
Thank you,
Great.
guys.
Thanks for coming in person.
Appreciate it.
And are you from Huey Place? Terrific. Please join us.
Damn well better be.
Be a member of the community, attending the meeting.
Peter Knopfman, Jones Knopfman Engineering, engineer for the owner developer of Hume Island Place. It is an existing subdivision. All infrastructure has been installed, as well as the map has been recorded. There is a stream buffer that is on the property that has been redelineated, and it is no longer exists as a buffer. So it opens up the property for additional development, and that is the reason for the rezoning request. The original rezoning was done in 2016 by another one of our clients who moved away from the project. The rezoning was done at 4.5 units per acre, which allowed on the 2-acre site up to 9 units. The existing subdivision for this duplex subdivision is 8 units. We are proposing to increase the density to 6 units per acre, which is still under the allowed 7. I did go back and looked at the original rezoning, some of the language. I would need, Shelley, if you go back into your memory bank back in 2016 with the 2030 plan, but it said in the language, at least on the application, that 4.5 units per acre meant the 2030 land use plan. So I don't know if that was the cap at that time. It might not have been.
It was 6 at the time.
It was 6 at that, okay.
The 2045 land use map update is the one that pushed it up to 7.
7, okay.
So help us understand, if it was 6 at the time of the original rezoning, then why was that rezoning for 4.5?
It was an additional condition added on in order to make it more palatable to the town council at the time. And also to indicate the number of units that the applicant actually wanted. We had no idea that the stream was gonna disappear.
Right.
It does happen, it just doesn't happen that often. And it especially doesn't happen that often where a developer is still working on it and wants to come back in. Because normally there's just too much involved in coming back and doing that. But primarily it's because at the time we were looking at, there was a concern about density and the number of units in different areas. So if I'm recalling correctly, anyway, 2016 was a little while ago. So, but it's not uncommon for a developer or someone, even honestly, someone rezoning their own property to sell to a developer to add a condition limiting the density below what the land.
Sure. I think what I'm questioning is the reasoning for the change, right? If it was in the original rezoning, then
Well, in the original rezoning, 4.5 acres, or 4.5 units per acre worked because of the stream buffer. It's just limited to
Right.
developable land. Now that that buffer's been removed, it opens up more land for development potential. If the rezoning is approved.
Right.
So, just one other thing regarding this, the subdivision itself was exempt from stormwater because it was underneath the threshold. With this rezoning and adding more units, stormwater comes into play. So it will need to, it needs to include the total impervious for the site, not just what's being added. So, at least on the list of the give, so to speak, for the EAB, I think I just showed like a pet waste station. But when you consider the adding of stormwater into this subdivision that was once exempt or is now exempt, I think that's a big plus from an environmental perspective of adding stormwater to the subdivision. The other thing I just wanted to get into, I know there was a request for solar. I talked to the developer client. They are not opposed. However, I just want to make this one thing known is that they've already gone to design on all the duplexes in the existing subdivision, ordered materials, and are ready to really start pulling permits. So the request that is being made is that the existing units not be subject to solar. And he did offer to say one of the buildings is okay to do solar. We'd like to and if we're fortunate to have two buildings, then he would like to pre-wire and get it set up for solar. But he did make a commitment to do one of the buildings, one of the new buildings if the rezoning gets approved, to do it solar.
So to do one building with solar panels and one building with conduit?
Yes.
The buildings are already up and constructed, you're saying?
They are not constructed. He said that all the materials have been ordered. and just waiting on delivery. But, you know, the supply chain issues, you have to order up materials in advance to stay ahead of the game. So he said all the buildings have been designed, architecturally, and materials have been ordered. Now, I don't know what goes into roofing and that kind of thing with solar panels. I don't know if that's an easy fix or amendment. That goes out of my expertise, but that was just his request.
One story or two-story duplex?
Two.
Two-story duplex.
It depends on the design of the roof, and I looked at those duplexes and I assumed that they would have the direction that they have the roofs. I can work with him a little bit about that. But to configure them at home for solar is simply, as you probably know, dropping in a 3/4 inch conduit from the attic down to where the electrical distribution box is and setting that up so that it can be used. I mean, it's certainly not much of a thing. And that's why so many developers are more than happy to go ahead and do it, because it doesn't cost them anything and it looks really good.
Does it make sense, Bill, to keep the recommendation you've already made, but make a further recommendation that all 4 of the new duplexes should at least have conduit?
Yeah, that would be fine, because I recommend a solar on the other ones.
Right,
So, yeah,
but at least then there's
recommend that there's, I agree
2
with you.
layers, right?
Yeah, to have conduit on the new ones, because I don't know how they're going to be configured in terms of how they want to put those houses in anyhow. Depends on how the roof is facing.
Oh, sure.
And I tried to assume that the roofs are facing south because it made a lot of sense construction wise on those southernmost lots.
Well, they'll be oriented towards the cul-de-sac, similar to what's shown on the units 1 to 6? Yeah.
To the south side.
So they'll be oriented north-south.
Yeah.
Like I'd be happy to change it to say that 6 of the houses have solar PV of a minimum, I think I said 4 kilowatts. And then you can put them any place you want. And then have conduit for the remaining 4, whatever it is.
So those 6 are built already.
No, nothing's been built.
Okay,
But
okay.
what it is that is a completed subdivision in all the infrastructure.
Okay.
Duplexes haven't been built,
Okay,
but they've all been architecturally designed
okay,
and materials have been ordered to build them as.
understood. I think we're talking about the 4 additional.
The 4 additional, I would just say, make them solar ready
Well, and he's willing to commit to 1 having.
and 1
panels.
having solar. But I still want to keep in that 6, and I'll talk with you guys and the developer outside of all of this and try to help them put it in.
Yeah, like I said, I have no
I know
knowledge
you're
of
not.
the
guy should be sitting
the
alongside
updated
of you.
costs that might be incurred from a change from what's already designed to what might.
Yeah.
To solar. I don't know what that differential is.
Shelley.
But I mean, I could have further discussions with you, see what those costs really are. That I don't know at this meeting.
Just wanted to differentiate where we keep using the word house. These are either a total of 12 duplexes or a total of 6 buildings. So depending on how you want to reference it, house is just not going to be helpful to planning. Make sure that we understand what you're asking for so that when we're negotiating with the developer.
I was looking at the south side as each duplex has to have its own. So I would say 6 on the southern duplexes have solar at 4 kW each. Pre-wire the rest of them for solar, and one of the other ones can have solar too, as you suggested. Okay, so we'd have 7 solar PV systems at that point. Recommended.
Understood. I cannot.
I know you can't say yes or
I
no.
can't commit to it. I can commit to the one on the new.
Okay,
I can
I
commit to that.
accept that commitment.
we'll accept that commitment.
Yeah,
And then we'll go for the other 6
Right.
units at the back.
Do we have other questions? Suzanne, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit about the RCA. I see on the map that's being displayed, there is sort of a stippling pattern where the red 5 and 6 are indicated as RCA, and then there is the green box that's now labeled RCA. Could you talk a little bit about where your RCA is going to be and what that's going to look like?
Oh, sure. The lots number 5 and 6 are actually within what would be the former stream buffer. That stream buffer was, it needs to be preserved and protected, and it's classified as RCA as well. With adding these 2 duplex lots, of course, that would remove that stream buffer as well as the RCA. So we need to make up that area. And the area shown in green is the area that would be required to be planted to the RCA standard per the UDO planning requirements. Right now, that area is pretty much an open field, grass field. So it will need to be planted with substantial trees and shrubs and such.
Okay. And Shelley, that can qualify as RCA. RCA can be anything if they replant it. Is that correct?
Have to meet very specific planting requirements. And I'm just gonna quickly try to. There's a calculator actually that we put together a while ago. Here we go. For every 200 square feet, there has to be at least 1 large deciduous tree planted or 2 large evergreen trees. And in addition, at least 2 understory trees or 6 native shrubs. And so they have to meet this requirement. So for example, if this is 200 square feet, they could opt to go with, and this was just an easy thing for us to throw together to make it simpler on our developers to figure out and for staff to check it. So they would essentially do something along these lines, and they can put in their 2 large, it has to be split this way. 75% of it has to be large canopy layer, and the remaining 25% has to be understory or shrub layer. So we do have requirements for that, and it's actually above and beyond what most of our planting requirements in the UDO are. It ends up being denser. It looks small up front and then grows and fills in very quickly.
And so is there any kind of monitoring or performance guarantee on those plantings?
They have to be kept alive, and if they're not, so staff will go out there and check on it while the development's under construction, and then we drive by and check on them fairly regularly after that. And anything that is dead or dying has to be replaced if it's died after being planted or after being left alone.
And for how many number of years? Is that in perpetuity? Will the HOA then take on, because it's a plant, it's a garden essentially, right? For many, many decades until it gets into a more natural state. So how does that work?
It actually pretty quickly, you start seeing the seeds in the soil profile starting to sprout and take over and fill in the gaps. As soon as the soil gets disturbed, it pretty much, you start having blue jays planting acorns and stuff everywhere, and you start seeing a lot more trees coming up. So we normally, we've only had this established for a few years, so we haven't reached a maximum cap yet of where we're going out and looking at it regularly. But I would say, depending on for development this size, we would probably check in on it every 6 months or so for about 5 years. And by that point, it should have started to fill in pretty thoroughly with either what my mom used to call volunteer plants, or with the ones that are being planted, actually getting large enough to be self-sustaining and everything. Within and they only really need to be watered for about the first year. After that, they should be able to withstand drought and things like that fairly quickly.
And
Just out there in this RCA area, proposed RCA area.
There's a few. There's not a whole lot.
I know a lot of it got the understory got cleared out, but thought still maybe one or two larger loops on that section.
and so there's no like a management plan for it. Like, so if, let's say it got overrun with like tree of heaven, which is an invasive species, it's clonal, it takes over everything, it outcompetes native stuff. How is that going to be dealt with in one of these planted RCAs?
That's an excellent question, and one that we have not had to face just yet. I don't know the answer to that at the moment, but I would hope that the HOA would be responsible for making sure that that invasive species were removed. But I can definitely work with planning to make sure that we work out some kind of condition about that, and work with the developers.
And I might suggest even maybe putting it in the covenants that they have to maintain that, you know, free of invasive hardwood trees or something along that lines.
That last sentence you had mentioned might cover this, but I noticed in the calculator there was only the word native on the shrubs. Does that also include native deciduous and native evergreen trees and native understory trees?
It doesn't have to be 100% native, but they are prohibited from planting anything invasive. And we do strongly recommend all natives whenever possible, because it is supposed to mimic our natural environment. The RCA is. So planning does review the landscaping plans for that pretty thoroughly, and we make a lot of suggestions to change things that either we don't think will survive in a given area, or that native alternatives that will just do better, or will just at least do equally well as what's selected. But if you wanted to, you could add the recommendation that all of the landscaping in the RCA area be 100% native.
The only thing I'll add is that existing stream buffer that's RCA, it has very limited amount of trees, vegetation. So if we do go out there and plant that RCA, it is going to add a substantial, and I mean a substantial amount of trees to a site that really doesn't have a lot of trees.
Suzanne or Jason, is that making the zoning condition to be 100% native? Is that something you'd like to do?
Yeah.
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 Is that only within the RCA areas, or is that also for any landscaping? Sorry, I have to ask this question. Most of the landscaping for the rest of the site has already been selected, so that would require a revision to the landscaping plan, which would have to come in anyway. But I'm just letting you know what the process would be.
I mean, I'd be fine with just limiting it to the RCA, but Jason, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I'm always a huge proponent of natives, but RCA is fine with me.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I would also like to add a condition where you do either add some signage or perhaps a split rail fence, something to demarcate the RCA as a natural area not to be disturbed. So not for the homeowners to just view as an extension of their yards. I know that accidentally happens, but I think some signage or marking of trees or some kind of fence that doesn't impede wildlife movement would be appropriate in this location, since it is going to be a planted area and not as obvious as a natural area that's to be untouched.
If other questions or concerns?
What about pet waste stations?
Oh, well, I have no problem adding one.
I will
Yeah,
say
okay.
that we are at the 15-minute mark, just to let you know. And that the pet waste station was included as a condition by the developer, but a number was not specified.
Just more of a comment. If we're going to have the EU amendments that are coming out, if we're going to change and put the native species for RCA, let that be reflected across all of them, not just in particular this site here.
That's fair. I think Suzanne's particular concern here is that because it's planted, I think she wants it to thrive.
Right.
So I think that's-
Some areas that are nothing but wide open, it's not necessarily forested areas.
Megan, can we see the list of suggested zoning conditions?
Sorry. Terrible when you're blind. Couldn't see the front of my glasses.
Megan, on that last one, since it's not going to be adjacent to a wooded or natural condition, just in this case, it's just, you know, to the boundary of the RCA. Thank you.
You could delete a 4 kW system, will have 12 panels. Yeah. Probably, I tried to just say that so that people would know. That's okay.
Yeah. And based on Shelley's comment, it sounds like we need to clarify the homes comment on the floor of the homes. We're talking about buildings.
Or we could just not say the 6 other, because you said that they would commit to 1 on the new one, which would make for a total of 7.
I could commit to 1 duplex building.
Okay, that's what you'll admit to, but I'd like to recommend 7. Oh, 1 duplex building.
So 2 duplexes, 1 building, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So
making sure.
2 address stores, basically what you're saying.
I thought we were up to 7 when you said that.
Oh, no, Bill. I can't do that.
Well, I know, but that's a recommendation.
I'm just saying I can't.
I'll stick with the 6. As a, if that's okay with everybody,
Total of 6, consider a total of 7.
and we don't have to say which ones. Yeah.
Just for clarification, is you're talking about 1 building or 1 address store?
1 address as well.
I
So
mean, I thought we
if
were
it's a
talking about
duplex,
1
there's-
building.
Because you said 1 building, but say.
Right, that's
You
2
got-
doors.
You got 2 units in a building.
Right.
The building will be solar powered. So you're gonna have 2 units.
You'll have 2
Understood.
addresses.
That was my understanding too.
That's what you have 2 addresses that wow, so that
Right.
will have solar.
you have two solar panels systems on each duplex set, a blue duplex, which is 2 homes.
But what I'm saying is I can commit on
Right.
behalf of the
I understand.
So
I understand.
Megan, we just may need to reflect the commitment separate from the recommendation. So the developer is willing to commit
That's.
to solar panels on 1 duplex building, which is 2 homes.
2.
There is a further recommendation for more than that, but I think we should reflect the commitment going forward.
There are 2 recorded addresses, but then you know that's you're capturing both
Right.
1 4 kW system for each address.
per address store, that's correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Megan, could you change the second bullet point to say one duplex building?
Great. Great, thank you.
I
The
think you
second
can take
bullet
out
point.
2 systems.
Perfect. I'll go up to the
And then-
bullet point above that,
Yes.
and where it says one duplex, add building. So good. Perfect.
And then I think the further recommendation is that any duplex building that does not have solar panels does have solar conduit.
So rather than specifying the number, just saying the remainder.
I think that's better, right?
Yeah, because
That's
all, that way all buildings will have solar conduit.
Right.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm blind.
No, that's okay.
Feel like I'm in a coal mine.
Great. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve this list of suggested conditions?
Motion to approve the list, that's great.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. I will vote in favor. Suzanne?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye, thank you, everybody.
Jason?
Aye.
And Greg?
Aye.
Great, unanimously approved. Thank you very much.
Can I
Thank you very
make
much.
one statement?
Sure.
I've been here through two other meetings. And on this one here, every building has been said to have solar. I'm just saying, if that's what you're gonna require, be consistent.
What did you say? Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
You, in this meeting, you have required on this subdivision, this rezoning, every building to have a component of solar. In 2 other meetings, there was not commitment to do every building with solar. I think you need to be consistent.
I think that's fair. I do think the other 2 projects are different.
That's your discretion. All I'm saying is consistency to me matters.
I think that's fair.
Can I say that I try to be consistent in terms of looking at a project and asking for solar on certain buildings that make sense. Now, I didn't know that these were already prepared. You didn't have to commit to it. And I understand that. You committed to one, really. And as I said before, I would work with you and see what we can do. And if it can't be done, I'm not going to complain. I won't request that this gets denied or anything else, but I will help with you. And the apartment complex, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time, the apartment complex, you can't tell them to put solar on every apartment because they're rentals. If these are rentals, it can't be done anyhow. I assumed that they were going to be sold. If they're
Oh, I
not,
assume they are too.
yeah, if they're not sold,
I'm not trying to make a stink or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
we can talk about this off side, okay?
I'm just saying. I
understand what you're saying.
For consistency.
I tried to be consistent.
And I'm not saying, I'm not saying it's you specifically. Just saying that, I know you try to maneuver sometimes.
We'll talk later.
Yes, we will. I appreciate it. No, I appreciate everything you do. And I don't
Thank
mean,
you
like I
very
said,
much for coming in person.
yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Going back to, I know you said, no. So if these would be acquired by one individual and rent everything out.
I do think there's a difference between an apartment complex and.
I'm not saying they're, I'm just saying,
Those
but
two things feel different.
whether they're coming through. We could say a one manager coming and just acquire the whole thing and just rent the whole thing out. It's just like with apartments you have a specific address that you're in. And yes, it's one building with multiple addresses on it, where this is theoretically one building with two addresses in it. But here you have separate roof lines for apartments, you don't have separate buildings.
Right.
So just to use the word rental, it's very vague.
We do have whole subdivisions, single family, that are being acquired by groups that their entire business model is to purchase the entire subdivision, rent the whole thing out. We also have whole streets within subdivisions that are being purchased in the same way, maybe the whole development isn't. So Smith Farm, for example, has over 500 units, I think, feels like 500 please. And there are definitely streets that have been purchased, if not for rental to anonymous third parties, then at least, for rent to people's families and things. Legally speaking, although I totally understand where you're coming from, you have to be very careful about talking about ownership and everything, and we have definitely seen lots of situations where, depending on how the landlord decides to pass on the utility bills, sometimes solar could make sense on large apartment blocks as well. It just depends on how they decide to make their finances work. It's just a caveat that we have to be careful when we're talking about ownership types. You're right, there are differences.
I got a little bit into ownership because you're not allowed to, as an individual, put a solar system on somebody's house and lease it to them. That's not allowed. You have to have a special permit to do so. So it gets kind of complex in like an apartment where the apartment owner owns the building. And if he puts solar on it, then can he lease that unit for a little bit more and say he's given away the solar? It's kind of complex, and I'm trying to find, do you understand what I'm saying? Kind of, I'm trying to get some
individual address doors versus where you have multiple addresses under one roof.
Well, the utility commission rules on reselling electricity, which is what it should be doing.
And yeah, and that's the thing.
I'm not up with the current.
And that's, I asked the NCSEA sustainable group to give me some information. They didn't. I'm trying to find somebody that legally understands that if you own a building and have solar on it, can you lease that building? And the leasee gets the benefit of the solar.
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I haven't either, and I've tried a couple of routes right now, and it's always been thrown back at me, and I certainly know.
It would seem to me that would be the same thing as the apartment owner or whoever provides all the utilities, provides certain utilities.
Yeah, if he's providing the utilities and buying it from Apex or Duke Energy, that works. But is he providing the building with the solar and
I think
then
he would probably have to get some sort of a certificate from the utilities commission.
That and that's what I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then
everything is individually metered. That you get it's not one management company.
No,
it's not paying. Everything is individually metered. So
it's the twilight zone in all of this stuff, kind of, to try to figure it out. Because you can look at it and say, okay, a lease is kind of like a temporary ownership of that building, in effect. So then they can. But if they don't look at it as a temporary ownership, then can they use that electricity? I'll find out in another month or two, I hope.
Investigation necessary.
Yes, I won't drag.
So this company looks at more like on a commercial aspect versus a residential aspect. Even when I say residential, I mean even going back to apartments where you have multiple addresses on top of each other. And then so you go to the commercial, like the second applicant had there, what had the apartments. The amenity center, yeah, because that's just a common area.
Yes.
You can go with that structure because that's just maintained and everybody pays into one.
That's done by the owner, basically.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'd love to have apartment folks, have to do it a bit, but I don't. Well, I'll try to find out, and I'll try to come in
Yeah.
here with somebody that knows or with a paper that says this is the way it is. I won't take your time anymore. Thank you.
I would like to know the answer. It just seems like right now we're talking hypothetically, so
Yep, we
let's
are.
get the answer.
Yes,
I know somebody who could.
Great,
Could you?
I'll
that
talk
sounds
to
great.
him.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, I'll talk to him and see what I can figure out.
I thought I'd try the utilities, put the NC Public Utilities Group to,
Well, I know one or two people on there.
okay, that's.
Okay, you
That's
two are both in charge of getting the answer.
Yes.
We look forward to hearing. Megan, we're gonna move on in the agenda to the EAB swag order.
All right, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I just want to preface the presentation with this is a follow-up from the last meeting and what we discussed. Basic breakdown of kind of what we're looking at as far as what, the amount that we would order and where our price range falls. But reminder that we probably wouldn't actually start ordering until late this year, early next year, as the events are in April and May of next year that these would be ordered for. So there's time to change our minds, but I just wanted to give you a follow-up of what we talked about last time. So here's a quick summary. We got Apex Earth Fest, April 22nd, 2023, and then the next Saturday, or rather 2 Saturdays from then, May 6th for Peak Fest. So here's a summary up front of what we're looking at. We talked about food huggers, seed pots, the pet bowl, utensils to go, seed passport, and t-shirts for the board. So we have t-shirts made out of 100% recycled materials. 10 of those would be $250. And then I played with the numbers so that we had in sort of even amount as far as quantity goes, and then brought it down below that 5,000 range. So 5,000 is the max. Wanted to leave a little bit of wiggle room for estimated taxes and shipping costs. So this is what we're looking at. I'll take you through really quick what those products we're looking at. So we had the food huggers. Those multiple came in a package, and so we could just give those out individually. We have multiple options. You asked me about different options for the flower pot sets. So using the same flower pot that we ordered from last year, there's pollinators, sunflowers, marigolds, the lucky 4-leaf clover, pine tree, small sugar pumpkin, basil, oregano, thyme, parsley, and serrano peppers. So a lot of options there. You could choose one. You could choose a variety. Have to look back at the number. I think it was $250 in total for these. Of course, the trusty collapsible travel pet bowl that we had last year, that was a hit. And then again, those wheat straw utensils to go. These are a little bit more expensive, so we had to do less of these. The seed passports, especially for kids, and then again, those t-shirts. And there's the summary again. So any questions or?
My only question is, do we need to leave a little more wiggle room on the budget?
Yeah, well, my
That's not good.
question back to you would be what would you be thinking that budget would be used for? Is that
You don't
just
have
like a
anything in mind
safety net?
except for rainy day. That's it.
Maybe we could reduce the pet bowls to $250 instead of $300.
Okay, can do that.
That would knock it down some.
What would be the optimal wiggle room that you would like?
I think that's a great question, but I would think at least $500.
Okay,
Question about the t-shirts. Does that include printing?
that includes printing.
Thank you.
So I'll reduce the pet bowls and see where we're at. I don't think we'll quite make it to 500, but I'll play with the other numbers and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Megan?
Does that include shipping costs?
These do not include shipping costs, no. There are a few print setup costs, like for this one. So that would here for the pet bowls, add another $55, for example. I think only 2 or 3 products had that included. Or not included, rather.
Yeah, I just think maybe some of those numbers have to come down a little bit.
Sure.
So that if there, if another member of the board has another idea about some project, that there's a little bit of budget for that project.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I'll get that done and then we can come back to the drawing board later this year.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any items for open discussion?
I got a question. We saw 2, properties today that had large riparian areas, and those have buffer zones around them. How is that? Is it always the same amount of space beside those streams that is allotted or is required to be a buffer zone, or is it based off of the amount of permeable versus impermeable surfaces?
I can answer that, Jason. It depends on the type of stream it is. An intermittent stream, the stream that flows just part of the year, has a 50-foot buffer on either side required in the town of Apex, so 100-foot total. And a perennial stream, one that flows year round, has a 100-foot on either side, so 200-foot total buffer. And that's required town-wide, no matter what basin a development might be in.
So it's a standard. Gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Just an observation based on the presentations we had tonight. The developers really seem like they want some help with solar, and so I appreciate your willingness to sort of build that bridge.
More than glad to do it.
Because I think council would really like some concrete work in this area. And so the more you can help bridge that, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think you're right that once people do it, it pays off, and I'm glad they did it.
Yeah.
It's making that step in the first step is the first one.
Yeah, and I try to keep it low, and I understand what Peter was saying, because it did add up to more percentage-wise than some of the other ones, but
I think we've talked about that several times, so about
Consistency.
knowing what you're hearing versus automatically just shutting whatever down. But again, making the applicant educated as to what they're looking at.
I have a quick question for the board. Was the base info sheet that I sent out for each of these helpful? We had, okay. Just wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure that we get the highlights of what the UDO required in each development. If there's anything else that you guys want added to that I can provide, do it. Just let me know. Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I will.
Okay. Anyone like to second? Thanks, John. I'm gonna vote in favor. Suzanne,
Aye.
Patrick,
It's been a lot.
John,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Greg.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks.
Be in person next month.